In Honduras, in the midst of the political crisis, which has led to the election of 2 new boards of directors in parliament, the Private Business Council has asked the political forces in dispute to seek a solution through dialogue. The London High Court decided to allow Julian Assange to appeal to the UK's Supreme Court and challenge the previous verdict that approved his extradition to the United States. And Syria denounced an alleged participation of the U.S. in the Daesh attack on a Kurdish-run jail in the midst of a complex situation in the northeast area of the country. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Honduras, in the midst of a political crisis which has led to the election of 2 new boards of directors in parliament, the Private Business Council has asked the political forces in dispute to seek a solution through the dialogue. Businessmen from COHEP warned that the political crisis deteriorated the credibility of the political elite at a national and international level. They have called for unity as the only way to get the country out of the crisis. The spirit of joy that the Honduran nation have experienced since November 28th, with the overwhelming majority and victory of Xiomara Castro, with 1.7 million votes, turned into discontent and repudiation a few days before her official swearing into office. And Cuba confirms the release of Dr. Daimara Perez, who had been kidnapped in Haiti. According to an official report from Cuban Foreign Office, the doctor was kidnapped for 10 days, and after her release, it was found that she was in good health, which she also informed her family, whom she contacted as soon as she was free. The doctor was on her way to the Notre Dame de Petit Goff hospital when she was intercepted by armed individuals. Haiti is currently going through a wave of violence that reported more than 1,000 kidnappings in 2021. In this regard, the Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry recently said insecurity and domestic terrorism are among the country's main burdens. Also in Haiti, Trade Minister Ricardin St. John denied a possible increase in fuel prices shortly after fuel pumps experienced high demand in recent days due to the fake rumor. St. John confirmed to national media that prices will remain unchanged, while denouncing a deliberate campaign to create misinformation. The minister ratified on Saturday that the raw terminal dispatched over 200,000 gallons of diesel, 6,500 of kerosene, and more than 200,000 of gasoline, clear evidence that there is no shortages in the market. Haiti has suffered cyclical supply crisis. The most acute occurred last September when armed gangs blocked its distribution. In Baja California, Mexico, on Sunday, journalist Lourdes Maldonado was murdered. She has been the 3rd murdered journalist in this country during only month of 2022. According to statements from the police agencies in the crime scene, the body of the communicator was found in her own car with gunshots on the head near Las Villas in the city of Tijuana. Colleagues and relatives said that the journalist had recently won a lawsuit against former Governor Jaime Bonilla for labor debts. In 2019, Maldonado came to President Obrador's daily morning news conference and asked him for his help. Alfonso Margarito Martinez and José Luis Gamboa were two other journalists also assassinated just this year. In Colombia, the year began with the murder of 9 social leaders and at least 8 massacres. According to human rights organizations, the South American nation records an average of 1 massacre every 2 days. 2022 began with struggles for territorial control between armed groups scattered throughout the country. According to various organizations, the massacres and murders of social leaders are a clear sign of the worsening of violence. Leonardo Gonzalez, the coordinator of the Institute for Peace Studies, referred to the murder of native environmentalist leader Brainer Kurkuna and pointed out that since the indigenous guard is the protector of the defender and the territory, it has become the confrontation target. The indefinite national strike of truck drivers in Guatemala continues, with a blockade of several points in the 22 departments of the country as a pressure action against President Alejandro Giammattei. The initiative, promoted by the drivers of heavy, urban and extra-urban transport, cab and motorcycle cab drivers, seeks the repeal of the 6-month extension of the obligatory contracting of insurance for damages to third parties. On Friday, the government of President Alejandro Giammattei signed the measure that provoked the rejection of the Guatemalan transporters. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Government assured that they have a protocol for this type of scenarios and affirmed that the first resource of the executive will be dialogue. Meanwhile, the Transport Union and the National Coordinator of Transport disassociated themselves from the measure of force. Now we address other topics. In Peru, the president of the Spanish company Repsol, Jaime Fernández Cuesta, admitted that the company had an error of perception about the magnitude of the oil spill in the Peruvian Sea on January 15th, and that they only noticed the impact of the environmental disaster the day after the event. During a televised interview, the high executive stated it was not until the following day that they noticed the spill was spreading along the marine currents. According to the Peruvian Environmental Evaluation and Control Agency, the extension of the affected area on the beach and coastline is 180 hectares, and into the sea it is 713 hectares. Initially, Repsol stated that it was only a spill of 7 gallons of oil. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. On Monday, the London High Court decided to allow Julian Assange to appeal to the UK's Supreme Court and challenge the previous verdict that approved his extradition to the United States. The ruling challenges and follows a December decision by the London High Court to greenlight the US appeal to extradite Assange. An earlier decision that the Australian journalist cannot be extradited to the US due to the health issues and the inhumane conditions he might face in the US prison system was overturned at the time. US authorities have charged the 50-year-old under the Espionage Act for his role in publishing thousands of classified military and diplomatic cables in 2010. If convicted, Assange faces up to 175 years in prison. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson plans to send Defense Minister Ben Wallace to Moscow for talks with his Russian counterpart. The British Premier, who seeks to the crisis in Ukraine as a litmus test for Western unity and determination, wanted to take advantage of the invitation previously extended by Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu to send Wallace to Moscow. In his invitation, Shoigu insisted on the importance of keeping the lines open. Tensions over the Ukrainian conflict have been growing in recent weeks over an alleged buildup of Russian troops near the Ukrainian border that the West has called invasion. The Russian government denounced that the West is preparing new provocations around the conflict in Ukraine. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova denounced as part of a campaign of disinformation the United Kingdom's accusations about an alleged Russian plan to promote a presidential candidate in Ukraine closer to their interests, referring to former parliamentarian Evgeny Murayev. Moscow urged London to stop the provocations, which is said they were part of a strategy to manipulate public opinion on the conflict with Ukraine. The US and the UK withdrew diplomat personnel and their families from Ukraine under the pretext of an imminent invasion from Russia. The move, so far described by the U.S. as not an evacuation, is part of the recent push and pull from the Western powers over Kiev in order to create what Russia has denounced as a facade crisis, and follows in line with talks between the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Moscow's diplomacy head Sergei Lavrov to de-escalate the tensions in the region. The U.S. State Department told the dependents on staffers at the U.S. Embassy in Kiev that they must leave the country. It also said that non-essential embassy staff could leave Ukraine at government expense. Moscow repeatedly denied any invasion plan against Ukraine. And the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Oleg Nikolenko says it is premature of the United States to evacuate the families of its diplomatic staff in Kiev due to fears of a supposed looming Russian invasion.
Respecting the right of foreign states to ensure the security of their diplomatic missions, we consider such a step by the American side premature and a display of excessive caution. In fact, there have been no radical changes in the security situation recently. The threat of new waves of Russian aggression has remained constant since 2014, and the accumulation of Russian troops near the state border began in April last year.
Now we address other topics. Cuba surpassed the 4 million citizens vaccinated with the third booster dose against COVID-19 and surpassed the 33,799,932 vaccines administered to remain the first country in the world in doses administered per 100 citizens. At present, the Cuban vaccination rate is 299.49 per 100 inhabitants using domestically created, developed and produced vaccines. So far, Cuba accumulated 33,549,486 injections with its own drugs, Soberano 2, Soberano Plus and Abdala, of which 4,545,231 correspond to booster doses. The Ministry of Public Health also reported that at least one first dose was administered to 10,548,924 people, and more than 9,300,000 have received a second dose.
For me, the vaccine has been a blessing because I got vaccinated already. I have never had a reaction. I have vaccinated my mother, who is 91 years old, my husband, who is 72 years old, my grandchildren, who are 6 and 12 years old, and none of them have had any reaction at all.
In Colombia, deaths continue to increase due to COVID-19. In its latest report, the Ministry of Health confirmed this Sunday 217 new deaths, a figure that exceeds the almost 200 reported on Saturday. The Colombian Executive Agency also indicated the country accumulated more than 100,000 fatalities since the beginning of the disease in March 2020 and more than 5 million infected people. It also informed more than 20,000 new patients with the virus were notified in the last 24 hours. Health authorities continue to insist on the implementation of biosecurity measures against COVID-19 and its variants, like Omicron, which is the most prevalent one. On Monday, South Korea health authorities reported that the COVID-19 variant Omicron is the predominant strain in the Asian nation, as the country pushed ahead with a plan to shift quarantine measures from quick diagnosis and treatment for high-risk groups rather than focusing on reducing the number of coronavirus cases.
The percentage of Omicron cases has increased to 50.3%, making the Omicron variant the dominant strain. There is some percentage gap between the provinces. The southern Inshallah province has the highest number of Omicron cases at 82.3%, northern Yongsan province at 69.6%, and Gangwon province at 59.1%. Overall, the number of Omicron variant cases is rising rapidly all over the country.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Monday, Syria denounced an alleged participation of the U.S. in the Daesh attack on a Kurdish-run jail in the midst of a complex situation in the northeast area of the country. A member of the Russian parliament denounced the involvement of the United States intelligence in this recent attack. The claim also estimates that the strike of this prison, where there are Daesh inmates, was organized by the United States to justify its military presence in the area. Several representatives of the Syrian government urged Syrian democratic forces to drop their allegiance to Washington and emphasized the U.S. is pursuing a conspiracy to redraw the West Asian region and also to divide the area, especially in northern Syria. On Sunday, Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid held an official meeting with Palestinian Civil Affairs Minister Hussein al-Sheikh. According to al-Sheikh, they discussed several bilateral political points of great interest. He also had convened to the Israeli Foreign Minister the need to reach a political common ground between the two parties. On his side, Tel Aviv representative avoided making any kind of comment, and neither of the two provided any information where the meeting took place. Israeli sources also informed this is not the first meeting between these parties, which also discussed serious economic problems in the West Bank and how to advance initiatives to boost the Palestinian economy. And talks between the Taliban and the Western diplomats were set to begin on the outskirts of the Norwegian capital Oslo on Monday. The session is part of a three-day meeting that began on Sunday, with talks between the militant group and civil society representatives being the first such encounter in Europe since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan 5 months ago. Western nations represented at the meeting include the United States, the European Union, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy, as well as the Norwegian hosts. The U.S. State Department said its delegation aimed to discuss a range of issues, including humanitarian aid, human rights, security, education for women and girls, and the formation of a representative political system. Afghanistan has been cut off of financial aid since the insurgents' takeover, which aggravated the social and economic crisis the Central Asian country faced after 20 years of the U.S. war. And dozens of demonstrators gathered in Oslo to protest against the arrival of the Taliban delegation, the first to visit Europe since the insurgents returned to power in Afghanistan. The group have begun talks focused on human rights with Afghan civil society members in the Norwegian capital, ahead of a highly anticipated meetings with Western officials. The Taliban's last regime in the mid-1990s was marked by human rights violations, including massacres, mass detentions, and rape, as well as gender-based restrictions of education and free movement of women and girls.
The Norwegian government has invited Taliban here to Norway. We Afghans think this is to laugh in the face of all the people from Afghanistan who have lost family members over there. How can they invite terrorists who have killed so many people to sit down and talk about peace? You do not talk to terrorists. We are here to say no to Taliban, no to terrorists. I am already disappointed that my government, my politicians, Norwegian politicians, the Labour Party, can invite terrorists to our country. Among the people invited is Anas Hakini, who is still on the U.S. terrorist blacklist, meaning they are known all over the world as terrorists. They are invited to our country and served cake and coffee.
On Monday, Burkina Faso's President Roch Kabore has been detained at a military camp by military officers and soldiers following heavy gunfire around his residence on Sunday night in the capital Ouagadougou. Cabore's detention comes after sustained gunfire ran out of military camps in the West African country throughout Sunday, with soldiers demanding more support for the fight against Islamist militants. So far, the government have not confirmed that the army has this power or that Cabore have been ousted in a coup d'etat. Cabore's exact whereabouts or situation remain unknown, with some witnesses reported gunfire overnight and armored vehicles nearby the presidential residence. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.